Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is our third Deaf Hub Exploring Perspectives presentation series, DHEP. And today our presenter is Dr. Alesia Allen. She's the Assistant Vice President in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion here at NTID, RIT. Before we get started, I do want to mention two things. First of all, if you would like to have access to live captioning, we have a QR code on the door that you can use to access the live captioning link. If you have any questions, please hold them until the end. And if we have enough time for questions at the end, please come stand on this blue cross that's on the stage here to ask your question. So now let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Allen. Hello, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Dyl, for the introduction. Do you have a name sign? Dyl. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Dyl. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I am honored to be able to give another presentation. It's actually been a little while since I had the opportunity to give a presentation where I'm talking about myself, you know? I did this a little while ago when I had just recently gotten my PhD. And so now it's actually, I guess that was about 3 years ago. So 3 years later, I had to sit down and rethink about some of my professional experiences and some of the other experiences I've had since that time. So it's a good moment for me to look back, reflect on what I've done and where I've been, and at the same time also think about my future. And I hope that what I share today will resonate with all of you in some way or another. And again, everything that I share is really my story. This is my personal story. So don't by any chance think that this applies to all Black deaf women or all Black women or anything. This is just my own journey. All right, I got my clicker. Okay, very fancy. I grew up in Ohio. Anyone else from Ohio? No, one? Okay, one in the back. Where in Ohio? Akron, Ohio. Okay, Akron, Ohio. I think this is the sign for Akron, Ohio. Not sure. That's where LeBron James, the basketball player, grew up, in Akron, Ohio, too. I grew up about 45 minutes from Akron. I grew up in a pretty small town called Warren in Ohio. It's right outside of Youngstown, Ohio. So that's where I grew up. And just before I graduated high school, my father moved to a different church. My father's a pastor, and he had moved to a different church, and so he and my mother moved to Columbus, Ohio. So big OSU fan, big Ohio State fan. Anyone else? Yeah, a couple of us. Okay. Yes. We know we lost last week to Michigan again. I know, whatever. We're still, we're still good. We're still proud. Buckeyes proud. So I thought I'd share some cute baby pictures. I was cute as a baby, right? I keep going over to click it, and when I teach in a classroom, you have to go over to advance the slides, but I have this clicker right here. I just need to remember that I have it. One thing that I want to share, I like to share my story through pictures, not too many words, mostly pictures. So this is my beautiful, wonderful family, and I realize that I need to update some of these pictures. Some of us don't really look like that anymore, but that's okay. I have 2 older brothers and 1 younger sister. My parents are there in the middle. And then my oldest brother is on the far left. And then my second oldest brother, Brian, is with me there on the left. And then my younger sister, Bria, is also with me in that picture in the bottom left. Bruce is my oldest brother, so it's actually Bruce, Brian, and then me, Alesia, and then Bria. So that's fine. My 2 older brothers are hearing. I'm deaf, and then my younger sister is hearing. So I also think that's interesting. Just from the very beginning, I was a little different. I grew up mainstreamed, the only deaf student in my school. And I can share with you that the area where I grew up was a pretty predominantly Black and Hispanic community. But then the school that I went to was predominantly white. I didn't go to my local neighborhood school. My cousins, my friends were all in the same school in the local neighborhood, but I was the only one sent to a white school. And there weren't any other deaf students or deaf kids, in my area. There were some who had to get hearing aids when they were older, but really I had no exposure to deafness or ASL or other deaf people in my local home neighborhood. The white school where I went, there were a couple other deaf students at other grade levels, but I was the only deaf person in my classes ever. Once in a while, I would see another deaf kid during recess or during lunch or during one of those other sort of out of the classroom activities, but otherwise I wasn't around other deaf people all day. It was just me by myself in class. My mom taught me from a very, very young age that I should look good. I should be proud of myself. I should make sure that I, don't leave home looking crazy or anything, that I look good, that I make a good first impression, and that I should be proud of who I am, and I should present myself as being proud, because that way I can succeed and do whatever I want to do. So even looking at these pictures, my mom did dress me well. Even though it was the 80s, my mom made sure I left the house looking good. And from a Black family in a Black community, sometimes all we had in a predominantly white community was to look good, to look presentable, and to show that we could be successful by dressing the part. So that's something that I internalized from a very young age. I also looked tired. I was happy, but I was often tired. But I was also chill and confident too. So I picked these 4 pictures because I think they really show a spectrum of different emotions that led to the way that I navigated life as an adult too. Here, I also want to mention, my mom always tells a story about how it was really tough for her to put me on the bus every morning, especially when I was 3 years old and I started school, putting her little 3-year-old daughter on a bus out into the big world, knowing, my mom found out that I was deaf, and I'll talk about my identity as a deaf person later, but at that time I was identified as hard of hearing. I had a little bit of hearing loss, and so they called me hard of hearing. And my mom found out that I was hard of hearing when I was 2. I started school when I was 3, and so she put me on the school bus, walked me out, put me on the school bus starting at 3 years old, and that was really hard for her. Later on, when I got older, I thought it wasn't a big deal. I got home from school every day. But then now that I have my own daughter, when I put her on the bus, I feel that same way. And I started sending her to school when she was 5. And I was like, my mom did that when I was 3. I can't imagine that. That must have been so hard. I did not understand it for a long time, but now I really do, having my own daughter. It's so hard. I also remember that my mom, and I'll talk about this more later too, but my mom was really there for me from the beginning. She was very involved. And these pictures represent a lot of opportunities, and you'll notice that she's standing right beside me, literally and figuratively, in a lot of the pictures from my life. Some of you were mainstreamed here in the room who are deaf, right? A handful of people? Okay. I'm gonna show you my age. This was the 80s, early 80s. Do any of you remember these things, being a mainstream deaf kid? So we had these gigantic hearing aids with a big box that we had to wear, right? The phonics, the phonic hearing aids. And then I had 2 or 3 different teachers who used an FM microphone. And we had the color chip that you had to take off and leave in the classroom. And then in the next class, you got the different color chip that connected with that microphone looped into that classroom. That is old-fashioned technology these days, but that's what we had to do. And wear the hearing aids all day at school. It was really embarrassing. I was always embarrassed by it. Because again, I was the only deaf student in my classes. I was the only one with all this equipment going into the classroom. I had to give the microphone to every teacher. I had to switch out the little color chip and do all that. Later, I figured out how I connected with people. And so sometimes I would tell them, you know, I can hear the teacher when they leave. And the students didn't believe me at first, but I could, as long as the teacher was wearing the microphone. Sometimes the teacher would go out in the hallway, we'd be able to hear them gossiping with other teachers and all that. And I would let them know. And then I'd tell them, teacher's coming in right now, sit down everyone. So the teacher walks in, we're all on our best behavior, we look great. And that started really early for me. I wanted to find a way to connect with other people, with other peers. I wanted to, you know, for me, feeling a little bit different, being the only deaf student in my classes, I wanted to feel like I belonged and like I could connect with my peers. And really, I mean, God forbid, sometimes the teachers went to the bathroom with the microphone on. Have you all experienced that too, who used FM systems? Oh my God, come on, take off the microphone. So sort of an interesting, funny thing. I told my mom found out about sign language through this Signing Exact English, this yellow book on the screen. And it wasn't given to class, but it was given to my mom. And so she sort of looked through it and tried to sign a few things. And again, when I was mainstream, sometimes I would be pulled out to my homeroom class with someone else who signed and who was using this book. And so I was exposed to sign language. But at the beginning, I didn't want to. I wasn't interested in signing. I felt like I already looked different. For one thing, I was Black in a predominantly white school. I could talk a little bit. I could talk enough to be understood. I could kind of blend in and assimilate, but then now you want me to sign exact English and try to sign instead of speaking English? I wasn't interested. But my mom really wanted me to be exposed to it and wanted me to have this other option for communication. And I was not interested. I wouldn't do it. There were one or two other deaf kids who I would see once in a while, and so sometimes I would kind of gesture with them a little bit and sign with them a little bit, but not really. Again, I was trying to blend in with the other hearing people. I didn't know any better at that time. I already felt like I was isolated, I already felt like I was different, and I really just wanted to blend in with everyone. And then I also had, you know, speech therapy and all that. One experience that I have to share, I had such a hard time with a speech therapist at that time with coffee. She would drink coffee, and then she would be, you know, breathing on me and showing me what to do in the mirror and everything, and her breath smelled so bad. So that was my experience with speech therapy. But, you know, I do have to thank her for the speech training. It did end up helping me in the future. But anyway, so that's the Signing Exact English book. And then the last notebook, the black and white speckled notebook on the end, my parents once went to an IEP meeting with me. And again, I can't emphasize this enough, the importance of my parents being involved in my education. My mom is, you know, ridiculous.
No nonsense.
No nonsense. She didn't treat me any differently. She treated me the same as my brothers, the same as everyone else. And so funny enough, two things happened. The first is that I went to my regular IEP meeting, showed up with my mom, and they said, you know, Alesia, we've been thinking about how to prepare you for vocational training. Most deaf and hard of hearing students in this program do better with vocational training. You know, maybe you'd be able to do something else, but we really encourage you to do vocational training. You know, English isn't great for deaf people usually, so you should focus on your career. And my mom said, no. No. And I don't remember exactly what she said, but she didn't come off as being really upset about it, but she said very politely, but also very sternly, no. And I remember that she was upset about that, and she got me tutoring. And I will never forget, I had a tutor throughout late elementary, middle school, and then the first part of high school too. During the summer, you know, other kids are outside playing, but I would finish school, I'd come home, we'd, you know, ride bikes, go to friend's house, whatever. Sometimes my friends would stop over, and, you know, riding a bike meant playing outside, doing whatever, hanging out during the summer, and I couldn't do that. I had to do tutoring. And I had to do my writing and my English assignments in that black notebook. which I hated. I had to do it every single week. I mean, I did have plenty of time to play around outside during the summer. It's not like I was being punished or anything. But my point is that my mom got me tutoring, and that helped me so much. That helped my writing improve so much. My mom persistently made sure that I had equal access to opportunities that other students had.
So I'm very fortunate that I had my family around me, my cousins, my siblings, my family. It was always a good time. Generally happy people and a good childhood. We always had a good time together, and I remember trying to figure out, like, how can I take that experience and bring it to the school environment where I am, in a predominantly white school where I felt like I was standing out. You know, and I managed to be involved. I was very active. My mom was a very big proponent of me being involved and taking advantage of every opportunity I could. She had a lot of leadership opportunities. The person who mentored her growing up got her involved in things, and she passed that on to me. So I was very involved in school and sports, trying new things, just trying anything. You don't have to be good at it. You don't have to be the best at it. Just try, and try your best. Whatever you do, try your best. That's all my mother asked of me. So I was willing to do that. I was involved in softball, baseball. I played alto sax from 5th grade right up through high school. I was in the marching band. I was in the pep rally. We did the different sports events as part of the pep rally. I ended up running for a position in student Congress, student government in high school. Again, predominantly hearing white school, and it wasn't the presidential role, but I was involved in that group. And high school's an ironic time, right? Because to be chosen to represent all of the student body and not be like that student body, right? The role of VP in this, assistant VP in diversity and inclusion in my high school club, to represent students who aren't like me because I didn't hear and they did, and yet I got involved and I did my best and I worked my way up. So again, I ran track, I was involved in sports, softball, alto sax. All of those activities helped me meet a wide variety of people, even though I was a black student in a predominantly white school. And of course, I don't know how I can miss this, but getting back to what's on this slide is, right, my identity and my struggles with finding my identity. Am I hearing impaired? At the time, I was in what was called a hearing impaired program. That was the official name of it. And I didn't like the term hearing impaired. I used the term hard of hearing. But then I began to wonder, I don't know, am I deaf? And so just all of those identity struggles that stuck with me all through high school. And then I came here. But before I came here, my mom, and I'll never forget this story, so I was looking for college opportunities, ideas of where I might be interested, and I was looking at 3 top schools. Kent State University, my mom went there, so I wanted to go where she went to school. Or OSU, Ohio State, of course. I mean, anyone who lives in the state of Ohio, more likely than not, is going to have OSU on their list of college options, right? It's a very popular school. And then thirdly, there was another school. It was a smaller school, and it was where my mother got her master's degree. And I remember watching my mother get her master's degree. I was 8 or 9 years old when she graduated with her master's. And I thought, I want that.
Mount Union.
And it was Mount Union University in Alice, Ohio. Mm-hmm. So those were my 3 top schools. And I thought, I don't know. And my mom kept saying to me, consider other options. But I said, nope, these are my 3 schools. This is all I'm interested in. And then it so happened that my uncle, who came here for hospitality and hotel management, he got his degree in RIT, at RIT. I want to say he graduated in 1992, 93 maybe. And he said, Alesia, they've got deaf people at RIT. You've got to go there. Come on, let's go check it out. I was not having it. I wasn't interested. All right, I didn't want to be isolated again. I had gotten through high school with that experience. I had to work so hard to fit in. I just didn't want that experience again. But my mom, again, being very persistent, right? She hooked me up with VR counselors. She made sure we had all of that in the works. Through those connections, we heard about EYF, Explore Your Future. At that time, the Explore Your Future program was a new program. I was maybe the third or fourth cohort of students that went. And as soon as I stepped foot onto campus and experienced EYF, I was hooked. I said, okay, I guess I'm giving NTID a chance. Here we go. Well, what changed for me? What changed for me is EYF was the very first time I saw other Black, deaf, and hard of hearing students. Prior to that experience, I hadn't encountered anyone else who was Black or deaf and was hard of hearing. But through the Explore Your Future program, I had the opportunity to meet students who were like myself, students who did sign, students who didn't sign, students who were Black. I was floored at the opportunities, and in 1 week's time, I knew my life would be changed. At that time, there was no Facebook, there was no social media. We still wrote letters. We had pen pals, if you can believe it or not. We'd exchange addresses with each other. We'd write letters to each other from home. After EYF camp, we'd put pictures in the letters to stay connected. All the things you do on social media now, we did manually back then. You'd send a letter, you'd wait a week and hope to get something back and look through all the pictures about what your new friend was doing. You'd print doubles when you took the pictures. When you brought them to the store and you print them out, you'd have doubles. You'd keep one for yourself. You'd send one to your new pen pal EYF friend and see you at RIT, NTID, you know. And we would just stay connected. But that changed my life. That convinced me to come here to RIT, NTID. And when I did, when I was a matriculated student, I met more students. And I'll never forget the impact that that had on my experience of meeting other Black, deaf, hard of hearing students. And then Ebony Club, and I thought, this can't get any better, right? I was on the e-board of Ebony Club for a year. I became the president a year later. I was involved in the plays at Panera Theater. One person in the room remembers that. Remember, both of us? We were in this play here in this picture on the upper left corner. Sleeveless shirt in the yellow. That's who I'm pointing to in the back. But the reason I chose this picture, the reason it's important, right? And for those in the back, you might want to come sit up at the front. It's up to you. I'll let it go. I'll let you do what you want to do. Anywho, the reason this picture is important to me is because it was one of the first times that there was a fully Black, hard of hearing cast in a play. It was here at RIT, NTID. The entire cast was Black, hard of hearing. That summer, we did our rehearsals. Well, in the spring, this play was in the spring, and Luann Davis brought the entire cast to New York City to a private theater where we performed the play. So the whole summer we rehearsed, and then as a cast, we went to New York City, most of us, not all of us. And it was like EYF SBP again. It became one of those, right, most diverse experiences with the cast and the staff, and it's a memory that I hold near and dear to my heart. But those experiences, one by one, shifted my journey. Now I know, don't hate me. I know Gallaudet's our competitor school, but don't worry, right? Don't worry, RIT. You're near and dear to my heart. I bleed orange and black. I'm a tiger through and through. You know, I was a bison for a little while. I have to give them a little bit of love, but I'm an RIT tiger. So I pursued my degree. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology from RIT. And then I met an amazing man by the name of Peter Hauser. And, well, I forgot to add one thing. I remember thinking I was going to become a VR counselor. I had a great relationship with my own VR counselor. And she said, you know, Alesia, you'd be an amazing VR counselor. Complete your degree, come back to Ohio, get a job here in VR. You know, we'll support you. We'll send you back to school to get whatever further degrees you need, and you can be a VR counselor. And I thought that was it. That was my goal. And then I met this man. Like out of nowhere, he came to the College of Liberal Arts. This deaf guy, right? Dr. Peter Hauser. I remember at that time I was a junior here at RIT, so I had a year left before I graduated. And Dr. Hauser comes in and he says, you need to get your PhD, Alesia. And I said, are you serious? I mean, he couldn't be serious, right? Academics, rising scientists. I didn't consider myself in that realm at all. I didn't want to be in a lab. I didn't want to do research. Hard pass, no thanks. And he wouldn't let up. He said, no, you really need to get your PhD. He invited me out to dinner, to chats, to meet other faculty, to meet other grad students, and it was fun. I had a good time. They were down to earth, regular people. They weren't just these nerdy researchers, right? This was this really cool guy opening opportunities and opening doors for me, and yet he was this brilliant researcher. And he wasn't weird, it was cool, and he didn't sit in a lab all day. I mean, here he is deaf. He's working at the College of Liberal Arts as the sole deaf faculty in a predominantly hearing college. And that was the experience I had in school. And so every time he'd say to me, you really need to get your PhD, you need to do it. Little by little, he wore me down. And I was like, well, maybe, we'll see. Then I applied. Then I got invited for an interview. And I thought, well, all right, maybe there's something to this. I remember sitting down for the interview. I interviewed with 4 or 5 other students who were all flown into campus from all over. So you come for a day-long interview, and it's a whole event. And there were 1 or 2 of the interviews were group interviews. And several of them were talking about their publications and who they studied with and what they did and where they'd presented. And I didn't have a lot of publications. I had my senior thesis, but I talked about what I did have. I talked about what I was interested in, Black intersectionality and deafness and deaf studies. And I didn't have all of this academic language to explain what I'd done. I didn't have that experience of being a research-focused, student, but I talked about what I did, and I talked about my values, and I talked about why it was important to me. And even though I did that really from an honest place, I felt very out of place. I felt like there's no way they're going to accept me. And I said, you know what, Dr. Hauser, I need to go back to my first plan. I'm going back to Ohio. I'm going to be a VR counselor, I can't talk about people's cognition and their different types of brain cognition and whatnot and all this academic talk. I'm just a regular person, Black deaf identity. My world is not that world. But he slowed me down and he said, just relax, just relax. And then later I found out that I was accepted into the program at Gallaudet. And the rest is history really after that. I mean, I grew a lot professionally and academically at Gallaudet University, and it was one of the most difficult times in my life. Like both of those things were holding true to me. I didn't have a bad experience. Imagine this. I SimCom, I use spoken English and sign language at the same time. I'm a Black, deaf, hard of hearing person. And here I arrive at Gallaudet University, which is predominantly an ASL using university, and I didn't fit in. I tried to make myself small, I tried to fit in, I tried to, not stand out. And at the same time I was experiencing all of those struggles, I realized I was losing more of my hearing. And I would, go to the doctor and adjust hearing aids and whatnot. But my identity was changing again. And through all of that, I'm trying to determine what could my dissertation topic be. It changed 3 or 4 times throughout my studies. I wanted to do Black identity something, but what kept coming up for me was just seeing how other people were doing research and what they were presenting on the deaf hard of hearing experience and deafness and hard of hearing and such and hard of hearing and research that didn't apply. It was all deaf heavy focused, and that wasn't my world, but that's what I saw other students doing. There was some hard of hearing stuff. My interpretation at the beginning of my whole experience at Gallaudet was that adding a hard of hearing component to deaf research screwed it up, right? They want to consider deafness, they want to look at deafness, but as part of their cohort, they have to study hard of hearing. And so they have to make these generalizations because they have 2 separate groups. So they have findings for the deaf community or the deaf participants, and then there's other findings for hard of hearing participants. And it always felt like, that's not what I want to do. That left me on the fence. I want to study the hard of hearing Black experience. I want to study the intersectionality of those different identities. So long story short, I did my research on the hard of hearing hard of hearing Black experience. And I realized that it meant many things. Hard of hearing means many things. It's difficult to define. I was hoping to begin a whole new movement and simplify the definition. But hard of hearing is not one thing. It's not one identity or one experience. So I managed to get through all of that. I began my grad studies in 2004. I took the scenic route. A lot of different things were going on over that span of years. I didn't graduate with my degree until just a few years ago, if you can imagine that. And one thing I forgot on this slide, I was in Washington, D.C. during this really exciting time in history. I went into Gallaudet in 2004. 2008 was when the inauguration of President Obama happened, and I was there for his inauguration and the march, and I was on the grounds, and that was an unforgettable experience. And he signed my master's degree. It was a pivotal time to be there, to be a Black person, and to witness all of that live.
That took me a second, but I was like, oh my God, there it is. And then I got married. So a lot of different things happened. So I graduated in 2010 with my classes were all done. And at that point I was considered an ABD, all but dissertation. So in 2010, I decided to move to Philadelphia. I thought, why not, with my boyfriend at the time. We had dated about a year, and then we got engaged, and then we got married. And then I had what I call the I quit years. I call them my I quit years. This was about 2010 to 2015. And what happened during that time is I remember from 2011 to 2012, I actually came back here. I had a job as an academic advisor here at NTID, and I loved it. I reconnected with Peter Hauser. And Dr. Hauser was like, all right, come on, it's time to do your dissertation. So that started with pre-dissertation, which is defending your pre-dissertation proposal. And that allows you to start collecting data so that you can do your actual dissertation works. And so I was back, and Dr. Hauser was like, okay, come on, we got to do this. We got to work on your dissertation. We got to do it. And so I took this picture of me finding out that I had passed my pre-dissertation defense. So I was ready to start collecting data, and that happened in 2012. From 2012 to 2015, life happened. I had financial issues. I had to take a leave of absence from school for a while. I was not able to continue because of my financial issues. And at that point, I had gone through 2 different chairs of my program. So your dissertation committee has to have a chair. My first chair retired, and then my second chair also retired. And so I had gone through a lot of changes with my dissertation committee. That would mean that I would have to reconnect with someone else, find another person to be my chair, start a new committee, find other committee members. So there was a lot going on. I took a leave of absence, I left school for a while, and I ended up working in Philadelphia, where I had the opportunity to provide clinical services, including therapy, individual and couples therapy, working with kids to older adults. And I spent a very brief time at New Jersey School for the Deaf.
Marie Katzenbach.
Marie Katzenbach School for the Deaf in New Jersey. I was there for a very short time, just about a year, where I got to work with a lot of children with multiple disabilities, mental health challenges, and provide support for them. But my heart was really in working with residential therapy facilities, so working with teens and boys especially, who were all Black. I got to work with them, individual, as well as their families, and other support services in the Philadelphia community. And that really exposed me to the systems of oppression and the way that systems are deeply embedded with white supremacy. I didn't have a lot of vocabulary at the time that I do have now through my DEI work, But at that time, I was seeing how the system was just not accessible. Interpreters were not accessible to deaf and hard of hearing people. Children's services through Pennsylvania School for the Deaf, for many of them who were Black, they struggled with services there, but then they also struggled with accessing other services in their community too. And I saw that there was so much going on with access issues, with systemic issues, and the kids would see me and they would feel like I could finally understand them, that they finally had someone else who could understand them. And that ended up, I wear my heart on my sleeve, that ended up just being too much for me, and I became emotionally burnt out from it. And then at the same time, I also felt some obligation to stay with them, because if not for me, who else would be there to support them? And who else could relate to them like I could? I have always been an advocate, but I think that period working with Black boys especially, that's where I really developed my advocacy skills and my willingness to work with people within the system and to fight against the system. That really came through that time and that experience, and that's carried me to where I am today. Being at Gallaudet, being in the different roles that I'd had, I looked back on how many connections I had made, and I went through it. I've been there, I've seen that, but that work was extremely meaningful, but also very difficult. And then I got married, all of that was happening, and then, and by the way, I can't believe I forgot to mention this. I think it was maybe 2014, I sent a letter at the time to the director, Patrick Bryce. He was the director of the program at the time and later became part of my dissertation committee. But I sent him a letter, a really long letter, about a page, and I said, thank you so much for the opportunity to be in the clinical psychology program at Gallaudet. Everything's been wonderful. I quit. I'm done. I'm done. It was a wonderful experience, but I said, I don't think it's for me. Helping these kids in Philadelphia, doing all of this. I don't know if I even have the physical capability to be able to continue in this program and complete my degree. I said, thank you for everything you've done. It was great, and I'm done. And I thought I would be done. Can you imagine how many years from 2004 to 2014? And I was just done. And then he contacted me. And he said, I'm sorry you feel that way, but you're not quitting. Sorry, I'm not accepting this. You will finish your degree. You are almost finished. All you have left to do is defend your dissertation. You need to collect your data. You need to figure it out. I know you have to pay a little bit, but you need to accept this and you need to figure it out and finish your degree. He's a white man. Can you imagine? A hearing white man who probably saw that potential in me, and he was not willing to let me go. And I want to emphasize that it's really important, and I'll talk about this more later, very important to have sponsorships. You need to have allies, you need to have mentors, but you also need to have sponsors too. Sponsors are the people who are white, the people who are more privileged, who can stand up for you and speak for you and make space for you when it's difficult for you to do that. And I'll talk more about that later too. But my point is that he said, I don't accept this, you can't quit. And can you imagine, I thought, I wrote this letter, I thought I was done, I felt this surge of relief, and then he said, no, you're not done, you're staying. At the same time that he refused to accept me quitting my PhD program, I forgot to mention an amazing woman named Jennifer Gravitz. And if you remember, I mentioned that I had worked as an academic advisor here from 2011 to 2012. When I left, that was a contract job, that's why I didn't continue. It was only a one-year contracted job anyway. And Jennifer told me, when you finish, you come back. As soon as you get your PhD, you come back again. And I said, okay, okay, whatever. If I ever finish, we'll see. Once in a while, she would still contact me. She'd ask, how's it going? I'd say, nope, not done with my degree yet. She'd reach out again, still not done with my degree yet. around 2014, she had several openings in her department. And so she reached out. She said, Alesia, she called me. She said, I want you to apply for this position. This is a psych position. You should apply for it. You'd be a perfect fit for it. And I said, well, I don't have my PhD yet. I'm not done. And she said, that's fine. You get here. I'll support you. You can finish your PhD while you're working here. And you can apply for this job as an all but dissertation, as an ABD. And I thought, She said, okay, just do it. Just do it. Come on, just apply. She said, I have the final say. I'll pick you. Just do it. And I thought, okay. She said, take control. It was just that simple. Take control. At that time, I was completely out of control. I was a bit of a mess. And so I accepted. I applied for the position. And then I didn't get it. And I said, Jennifer, no. I love you, Jennifer, but no, I'm done. I'm done, I'm out. And she said, no, wait. And at that time, there were other folks who were competitive, who had more experience than me. I mean, the person who was selected is Matt Dye. If you know who he is, he was definitely the right person for the job. He had way more research publications, grant experience than me. He was way more qualified than me at the time. I can't argue with that at all. Very fair and square. It's a very black and white thing. He was more qualified than me. But Jennifer said, yes, I know, but trust me. That's what she asked. She asked me to trust her. She said she would figure it out for me. And so she created a visiting assistant professor job. And if you can imagine, I was working with teenage boys in Philadelphia. It was August, and I didn't know if I would get the job or not. It came to August. Jennifer did everything that she possibly could. And 1 week before school started, she let me know that I got the job and I could move to Rochester. And I said, with 1 week? I already had a job. I was in a more administrative role at that time too. I really needed to give them 1 month notice before I moved or left. But I had faith. I told them I quit. I lost my vacation and PTO time because I didn't give them enough notice. And I moved here to Rochester with everything I could fit in my car. I left my husband in Philadelphia. And I got here in Rochester with no place to stay. And then at the same time, my longtime good friend who I had met at Gallaudet, some of you may know, Dr. Joseph Hill, he got a job the same year here at RIT. So I was able to stay with him for a little while until I got myself together and found a place to stay. So that took a lot of faith for me to leave my job in Philadelphia with short notice and move to Rochester with a week. I didn't even have all of my paperwork processed. I didn't have access to my account in SIS yet. I just showed up to school and I said, Jennifer, thank you so much for everything you did. She said, you have to go to class right now, go. I didn't even have my schedule. I didn't know what class, I didn't know where I was supposed to go, but I did. I walked into the classroom, I taught a class. I said, this is my first day working here at RIT. I understand that I'm teaching Intro to Psychology. We will figure this out together. I don't know what the textbook is, and one of the students held up the textbook for me. I said, great, that's great, thank you. I said, we will figure this out together. I will create a syllabus. I had it ready to go in week 3. We had to adapt. We got through it together. My point here is that Jennifer Gravitz believed in me. She created that opportunity for me. And unfortunately, she passed away about 3 years ago, too, almost 3 years ago. But she was, again, another example of a sponsor to me. So I was here, I had this job, I was teaching, I thought I'd finish my PhD, I thought I was on track, I had all the support I needed, Dr. Hauser was back in my life, all the stars were aligned. I thought I could figure this out, and then I got pregnant. And I thought, I can't get nothing right around here. I can't get everything in order. As soon as I think I have everything in order, now I'm pregnant. At that time, I was still in a long-distance relationship with my husband, Earl. He was still living in Philadelphia when I moved here. So I was pregnant. He worked for the IRS. He had a great job. We didn't really necessarily want him to quit his job to move to Rochester with me. And my job wasn't permanent. I was only a visiting assistant professor. So, and now remember, at that time, I was 4 or 5 months pregnant. I still didn't know what I was going to do. I knew that I could not do this by myself. I could not do it alone. And so Earl left his job. He moved here to Rochester with me. And I have to say that Jennifer Gravitz supported me through that whole process, through that whole journey. Now I have my daughter. She was born in 2016. She's 7 years old. Her birthday was on Tuesday. She just turned 7. I have these new school pictures of her here from kindergarten, first, and then second grade. One thing, oh, I should check. Okay, all right, I need to hurry. So one other thing I want to mention here is one of the most meaningful things about my time here was data collection. So remember, Jennifer Gravitz was supporting me. She was pushing me through my PhD program. She helped me with my IRB process. I was pregnant, I had Phoebe, I went on maternity leave, and then I came back and I was really serious, I think that was 2018, about finishing my dissertation. One thing that she did that I didn't like is that she told me one semester I wasn't teaching at all. She told me to focus on CCL, please help me someone. The Center for Culture and Language. Some help from the audience. The Center for Culture and Language. I can't believe I forgot that acronym, but that's okay. So Jennifer Gravitz told me to stay with Dr. Peter Hauser for the semester, not teach any classes, and work in the Center for Culture and Language. And I had great scores for teaching. I was a good teacher. Students loved me. I enjoyed teaching. I wanted to keep doing it, and she took that away from me. She told me to stay in the lab and do my dissertation. I needed to do my data collection. I needed to finish my dissertation. And I was so upset at the time. Peter Hauser sits down with me, looks me in the eye, and says, "What are you doing? Have you finished it?" And so I would have to sit there and look like I was working. And Dr. Jess would come in the lab. She had children too. I'd talk about my daughter. And Peter would come over and say, "Back to work. Alesia, stop talking. Back to work." Like, geez. So my point is that that's what I needed, though. I really did need that at the time. If not for Dr. Hauser doing that, I don't think I would have finished my dissertation. So coming back to data collection, Jennifer had the bright idea, an amazing idea, to collect data during the last week of class. Actually, it might not have even been the last week of class. It was between the last week of class and final exams. It was very last minute. And I did not think it would work. I needed about 100 students. I didn't think it would be possible. We had IRB approval and everything, but she said, "You just got to do this." So I reached out to my colleagues. I asked if they could tell their students to come participate in my research study. We would have data collection during this 1 week. It's the end of semester, so we had events like the ADC banquet. I had tickets to go, and I would ask participants to come join my study during this week. I didn't feel very optimistic about it. I thought maybe we'd be lucky if we got 50 people. And then we had a line out the door, like out the door, around the hallway, and through another door, right out there. I did data collection in this room. These are students who said, "Finally, there's no research on hard of hearing people, but that's me." And all of the students who came in said how meaningful it was that I was finally doing research with deaf and hard of hearing people, and hard of hearing people with that focus. I also paid them to participate in my study, and many of them said that they didn't want the money, that it was just more important for them to be part of the research study, but I still paid them. So I did 2 days of data collection. Like I said, had a line out the door and around the hall, and after a few days, we still had a line out the door and around the hall. And there was so much support. There was so much social support. And thanks to that, students would tell other students who were hard of hearing to come and participate in my research study. And do you remember I've talked about sponsorship and my sponsors? And my chair was right there supporting me the entire way. She was helping me through the whole thing, and it was just incredible. And my friends and colleagues and community helped me make this happen. You may recognize some people in the pictures: Dr. Joseph Hill, Roxanne Richards, Bakar Ali. So many of them helped by getting the word out and by helping me run subjects that evening.
So my dissertation defense, I won't go on and on about this, but what an experience. It was a small room. I didn't expect people to show up at all, and the room was standing room only. It was full. So one of the many things that made it meaningful was that one of my Gallaudet colleagues who worked at MSSD, which is their middle school, high school, had their black deaf students come to my dissertation defense, right? They felt like I needed representation, and they needed to be able to see someone like me defend a dissertation. So you can see the students sitting on the floor, and they were riveted. My mom was there. I wasn't able to talk to a lot of people after that because I had to leave, but the point was my mom told me later that the students were saying, "Oh my gosh, your daughter's so cool, Alesia's so cool," and she was so proud. It was just a proud moment and a beautiful day. My dissertation defense, again, it's an accomplishment that couldn't have happened without the support of all of the people who surrounded me on my journey. Allies, mentors, family, friends, Jess, Jennifer Gravitz was there, Dr. Hauser was there, right? And he said to me initially, "I'm so sorry, I can't come to your defense. You're gonna be okay. I believe in you, don't worry about it." And I was like, "Yeah, of course, middle of the week, you're busy. I don't expect you to be there." But I'll never forget standing there in the front of the room, just about ready to begin, and he shows up and walks in the room. Right, there Peter Hauser walks in, and he's smiling in the back, innocently looking at me, you know. And I tried to put on a good face and a brave face and just get through it, and I did, and it was an amazing day. So I'm going to summarize these slides here, but in case you have any interest on what a dissertation defense is like, you identify, I had the identity of a hard of hearing person, and so that was my identified group. And I was trying to determine some of the factors that go along with people who identify as hard of hearing. So I was trying to find out what things tended to show up in people's lives who identified as hard of hearing, who didn't have satisfaction, like what contributed to their psychological well-being and their sense of belonging, right? And the sense of belonging, it turns out, is key. You have overall psychological well-being, and then there's the sense of belonging. And for those who are satisfied with life, who have access to resources, access to sign language, access to information, those are the people who have a sense of well-being and a sense of belonging that's in a satisfactory range. So here's the other thing, right? My life is just different. I know it, right? I finally completed my dissertation in 2019, published my findings, and the one thing that I had left to do, I had an internship that I had to complete. It was a clinical internship. I had to put my teaching on hold. I had to find a clinical internship that would last 1 year. And so 2019 to 2020 was the year of my clinical internship. Now keep in mind, I defended my dissertation in 2019. My family was thrilled. They were so excited to be there for my graduation. They were going to rent a bus, show up in DC, and be there to cheer me on every step of the way. So I completed my internship, got that all done. Spring 2020, I mean, I'm so close to the finish line, right? My family reserved hotel rooms. You had to do that well in advance in DC because of, the numbers of colleges, and then COVID hits. And I thought, it's okay, right? We're just gonna shut down for 2 weeks. We're gonna flatten the curve. It's no big deal, nothing's gonna change. Everybody stay cool, no problem. And we know that's not what happened. We know that COVID continued on. And I thought, I can't even get graduation right. Dang, come on. But, I had my gown. I was gonna have my own graduation outside of my apartment and celebrate myself. And so I walked along the sidewalk. I asked a good friend of mine, Tammy's last name, somebody help me, Tammy Wells. Tammy Wells, amazing photographer. I said, Tammy, come take some pictures for me, right? I'm going to have my solo graduation, right? Just me and you and the birds and the squirrels, right? It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be great. And I walked along the sidewalk and I cheered myself on. And, right, this was not I put my best face on in a difficult situation, but that was my graduation day. Okay, so in 3 minutes that I have left, I'm going to go through this really quickly. Research, mentors, family and friends. My mom, she's the person who got her own master's degree, right? And she was my role model. And she helped me get to where I am today. And my grandmother, I can't do anything. So my grandmother's favorite line, she's amazing. I honestly, I got my PhD. She says I got my PhD in common sense. She's the OG PhD. That's my grandmother, right? And then it was my mom who got her master's degree, and here I am. So she's going to be 96 in February. She's still alive, my grandma. She's having some struggles right now, but she's still here with us. And this picture was 2023, New Year. She doesn't even look 96 or even in her 90s, right? And then this is more recently. So what worked, right? Alesia, you got your PhD as a black, deaf, hard of hearing, whatever woman. So what worked for you? Well, here's what worked for me. Surrounding myself with black women and deaf and hard of hearing folks. My mom, my grandmother, other successful black, deaf, hard of hearing people. Someone who's sitting right across from me here. Catherine Clark. There are a lot of black, deaf women in this community, right? Michelle Obama. I read her book. I watched the movie. Beyonce, I read their life story. All of the people, all of the black, deaf women, black women in our community, I just surrounded myself. And deaf folks too. It's important to know what's up with the deaf community. And it's important to recognize that being black and being deaf are two separate identities that you negotiate, but they're both part of who you are as a person. Remember I talked about my research community, my family, mentors, sponsors, all of that. I relied heavily on all of them. Black women have this tendency to want to do things all by themselves, but don't. Resist that. Rely on your community because you need them, right? And remember, finding spaces where I belonged. It's hard to find where you belong sometimes. That's a struggle, but find where you belong. And remember, all along that way, remember my I quit years, right? I took the time to get married. I took the time to live life. The journey to my doctorate was not a straight line. You know, I didn't say I couldn't be involved in fun things because I had to constantly work on my studies. In the beginning I did, but I realized I had to have some work-life balance, and I had to take advantage of the fun opportunities in life as well. And then remembering that your journey is an identity. Your journey is an evolution. Who I was before becoming a mother is not who I am now. Who I was in the beginning stages of my professional career before it took off is different than who I am now because of all the experiences I had, right? You don't know what you don't know until you experience it. And so you're always going to look back because your journey is ever evolving. Right? Maybe I'll become a grandmother one day. I don't know. That's going to be an even different experience. So we are always changing and evolving who we are. So don't think that you've reached the pinnacle of understanding who you are. Give yourself permission to change your mind, change your course, and live your life. And take care of your damn selves, right? Black folks don't do well with this. We just don't. Take care of yourself, right? I'm teaching my daughter about self-care, and if I don't model it, she's not going to learn it. Right? Whatever it is that you do, meditation or whatever, for me it's watching TV. I just like to mindlessly connect to another world on TV, but self-care is important. And phew, okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Could you expand a little bit about sponsors, allies, and mentors? How do you differentiate between each of those roles?
Sure. So there could be overlap in the roles. That's certainly a possibility. There is some uniqueness to the sponsor role. So for example, Jennifer Gravitz, right? She may have seen that I didn't get one opportunity. And she may have opened the doors for me to go into another space, or to take the time to create another position, right? So it's 2 or 3 people that you may have a connection with, and those people have unique connections and clout within the university. And so, she'd be able to talk me up to other people in her circles of administration, or be on the search committees, or create the search committees, or be the person to advocate for me in whatever her role is, to help create the space for me so that I could have those opportunities. Without those sponsors creating those spaces and opportunities, it's more difficult to navigate that. So they may show you how to do something. Mentors. And mentors may show you how to do something. Sponsors can be mentors as well. I mean, Dr. Hauser has, for example, on the NTID
Administrative Council, what we call the NAC, as a Black woman having a seat at that table, there are some things that I just have to be careful about, as a Black woman. And Peter Hauser knows that he brings privilege as a white man. So he can maybe say things that I can't. He might be able to raise more unpopular issues in a way that I might have to be a little bit more careful. He can take the risk and put himself out there, raising the same points that I might, but he steps in front and takes the hits and takes the lead, uses his privilege to make that space and create that space to have the continued conversation where I might not really have the privilege to do so. Allies, again, act in that same way. An ally is a person who wants to provide access, who wants the world to be an equally and equitably accessible community, and they help to create the space for that too, whatever that means. But again, sponsors are generally someone who's got a position of power, more years of experience, maybe tenure, clout within an institution, a number of different roles. But I don't know if I clarified that, if that makes sense. Anyway, my point is it's important to have a community, surround yourself with community, whether it's people of color or, right, whoever you are. We all need a community around us. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Allen.
Thank you, and have a good break.